Welcome to the Partnership for Healthy Cities Summit 2023.
Please welcome to the stage Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege for us to host the inaugural Partnership for Healthy Cities International Summit. First and foremost, let's please show our appreciation to our wonderful performers from Sadler's Wells. I've been advised to warn you, please don't try those at home. And if you're going to try them tonight on the dance floor, please practice in the hotel rooms before you come to the dance floor. It's really embarrassing not pulling off that body popping. Look, I know many of you have taken a long and arduous journey to be with us. So we've rolled out a true British welcome. The best of London's culture with Sadler's Wells, but also for those Harry Potter fans, platform 9 3/4 is 2 minutes away, just over there at King's Cross. And I've allotted one of only 10 days in the year when the sun shines in London for your visit. So hope you appreciate it's not raining today. Look, seriously, can I begin by welcoming you all to London and by thanking our friends at Bloomberg Philanthropies, the World Health Organization, and Vital Strategies for the huge efforts that's gone into organising this wonderful conference. I also want to pay tribute to the founder of this superb initiative and someone I'm proud to call a friend. Mr. Mike Bloomberg's here as well today. You know, the true test of a just and prosperous society is found in the standard of life enjoyed by our children. We, of course, have a moral obligation to ensure all children are nurtured and loved. But it isn't just a matter of principle. It's been said that if we could have but one generation of properly born, educated, and healthy children, 1,000 other problems of government would vanish. And so I'd like to share our story of how we're seeking to advance the health and well-being of every child raised in our city. As you know, exposure to toxic air impairs our children's brain development and heightens the risk of asthma and cancer. The inspirational Rosamond Adukisi Deborah, from whom we'll hear later, had her beautiful and remarkable daughter, Ella, cruelly taken from her because she was poisoned by the air she breathed. As a mayor, a parent, and a humanitarian, I couldn't sit back and allow this misery to continue any longer. One of our responses came in the form of the ultra-low emission zone. The ULEZ requires vehicles driving on our streets to meet the toughest emission standards enforced by any major city in the world. Its impact has been nothing short of transformative. 4 million people now breathe cleaner air, and toxic nitrogen dioxide levels have been cut by nearly a half in central London. We're now expanding ULEZ citywide, bringing cleaner air to every Londoner. But none of this has been easy. Shamefully, there's been a coordinated effort by some to question the science, rationale, and benefits of clean air. For those of you that have been outside, in fact, some of those protesters turned up outside this summit. A couple of the signs read, WEF, World Economic Forum, Stooges. Another one reads, this push for healthy cities is a cover for global tyranny. But no matter what they throw at us, it's a fight worth having and a fight we must win. I'm proud to say our success hasn't been limited to cleaner air. With London experiencing one of the highest rates of childhood obesity of any European city, we banned junk food advertising across our entire public transport network, a move estimated to have prevented almost 100,000 obesity cases and expected to save our health service more than £200 million. But during the worst cost of living crisis in memory, it was clear more needed to be done. That's why we're providing free school meals to every primary school child in London for the next academic year. As a recipient of free school meals myself when I was younger, I know the difference this will make to educational attainment, to health outcomes, and to social cohesion. This is just a snapshot of the investment we're making in a healthier future for all our communities. And while I'm eager to share London stories, my team and I are even more eager to hear yours, because we have so much more to do, and that's what this forum is all about. As some countries around the world become more isolationist in their approach and resistant to change, we as cities must remain united and together to confront the biggest challenges of this century. You know, this is a coalition of 70 cities which 300 million people collectively call home. By harnessing the expertise, the creativity and ambition in this room, I'm sure we can forge a healthier future for all. And on that note, I'd like to introduce the architect of the Partnership for Healthy Cities and one of the leading advocates of health advancement across the world, Mike Bloomberg.
Well, hello, everyone, and let me begin by thanking Sadiq for the introduction. And once again, let's hear it for the Sadler-Wells dancers. In honor of this amazing group of city leaders, I offered to join the dance performance, but Sadiq said it would be better, it would be an even bigger honor if I didn't, so I did. But nevertheless, I'm going to go back and tell my daughters I could have done it. Seriously, let me give a very warm welcome to all the mayors and city teams that are joining us from around the world. We have representatives from more than 50 cities here, and together they are the home to hundreds of millions of people. It's really very impressive. And it just goes to show we really can reach out and we really can make a difference. Now, I know how busy all of you are and how hard it is to step away from your cities, so thank you for making the time to be here and for the outstanding work you've done through the Partnership for Healthy Cities. And I will say it is wonderful to be here in London. I've said this 1,000 times. If I have to leave New York, this is where I'm coming. You don't need more taxpayers, do you? We really are together helping to save many lives and setting an example for cities every place. So let me also thank our key partners in this effort and in many others that Bloomberg Philanthropies is leading, the World Health Organization and Vital Strategies. A nice round of applause for them. Now, this is the first time that we're bringing the partnership members together in one place, and I think it's fitting that it's happening here. London, as we all know, is one of the world's most international and dynamic cities. It is a center of commerce and innovation, and under Sadiq, it has been a global leader in bold public health policies that tackle non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, as we call them. And through this partnership, he's taken an important step to make sure that kids in London have access to healthy foods, which he talked about. And he's also been relentless in tackling air pollution. And our foundation has been glad to support his innovative work and help more cities replicate it. And I saw the nice welcome that you were getting outside as I got out of the car. It's nice to be recognized, and as long as they spell your name correctly, somebody said, it really doesn't matter. I will say that one time I was at a college graduation giving a commencement speech, and somebody from across the big stadium where I was talking, maybe 60,000 people, started screaming obscenities at me, and I paused for a second. I said, "Thank you for making me feel at home." And everybody shouted them down. I was very happy about it. Seriously, Sadiq has shown that a lot of leadership and determination to do what's right to protect public health, even when it's difficult and even when it's not popular. The truth is, nothing important is easy, and there's no more important job for a mayor than protecting public health and safety. People sometimes ask me what I'm most proud of from our administration's time in City Hall, and I can sum it up with one single number, and that is 3 years. While we were in office, the average life expectancy in New York City increased by 3 years, and by the time we left office, New Yorkers' life expectancy was 3 years higher than the national average. So I used to tell people from out of town, if you want to live longer, move to New York City. And I can't guarantee that everybody would, but statistically, yes, I can guarantee it. So we do know it's possible for cities to make a lot of progress on NCDs and injuries, and it couldn't be more urgent because it really is a matter of life or death. In low and middle income countries, 40% of all deaths are from people under 70 years old dying from NCDs and injuries, and that's so many lives cut short from causes that are often preventable. Sadly, the death toll will only grow unless we do something about this. It won't take a miracle, but it does take smart policies and the political will to implement them and defend them. And I think that's really the key. That's what mayors are there for, leading the way on NCDs and injuries. And mayors around the world have shown that they have the will to fight the tough battles and do what's right and to take risks and to try new things. And unlike other levels of government, mayors have to get the job done and show real results. And you have as good an example as I think there is around the world today in your mayor, who I've always been impressed. He does the right thing. He stands up. He doesn't do the popular thing, but he does what's going to make the difference to the citizens that he's responsible for. And Sadiq, you should be very proud of what you've done. I read about you every once in a while, and they talk about how the public's screaming at you. I have a smile on my face. Do I miss it? Yeah, maybe a little bit. But anyways, in New York, many of the policies that have generated the most the most opposition often turned out to be the most effective and the most popular. And let me give you one example. When we first proposed banning smoking in bars and restaurants, a lot of people predicted disasters. They said people would stop going out to eat and drink, and tourists would stop coming to New York, and businesses would fold. But the naysayers couldn't have been more wrong. The numbers of bars and restaurants increased, tourism reached record highs, and the policy proved phenomenally popular. No one would ever go back. And that was true even for the restaurant and bar owners who fought tooth and nail, and then as soon as they saw what happened, people finished their meal and left so they could turn over the table, and they never made any money from smoking, and they were always worried about being sued for an unhealthy environment for their employees, and that went away. So it was a win-win-win for everybody, and I remember the governor of New Jersey calling me and saying, "Thank you for putting the smoking ban in. It's the best thing that ever happened to New Jersey. Everybody's going to come across the Hudson River and eat in New Jersey." And about 3 months later, Christy Whitman, who was the governor and a really nice woman and very smart, called me up and said, "I just wanted you to know that today I introduced a bill to ban smoking in New Jersey." And I said, "Well, Christy, that's great. Why did you do that?" And she said, "Because my son hasn't spent a night in New Jersey since you put the ban in." So clean air is something that really matters, and whether you're walking on the streets or sitting down at a restaurant or either bellying up at the pub, what goes into our bodies really does make a difference. I am glad to say that more cities and countries have began passing smoking bans, smoking-free laws after we passed them in New York, and our foundation has been working to help those measures spread around the world, including through this partnership. And just as our success in New York gave other cities the data to act, we were never shy about borrowing great ideas from around the world. And I think that's one of the things that at the mayor's level, you really do things. If you think about it, federal and state governments may redistribute monies, but where government meets the people and gets things done or doesn't get things done, it's at the level that Sadiq and I have been lucky enough to serve. And so we've done the right thing, but there's always more to do, and I just wanted to tell you, you just got to keep at this. All of you are the ones that are really delivering these services around the world, and you should be very proud of what you're doing as well. Our bicycle share program, for example, was built on successful programs in Paris and Montreal, and rapidly expanding bus service. We learned from places like Bogota, Colombia, and Curitiba, Brazil. The work that we've been doing doesn't only help people in our cities, it helps inspire people to do it elsewhere. The idea sharing and success spreading is the driving force behind this network. There is so much great work happening in your cities, which we'll hear more about throughout the day. And to kick off the summit, we're honoring 5 cities that are helping to lead the way forward. It's always nice when you get recognized, and these cities really deserve to be recognized, but we know that all the other cities also deserve it. You just can't give an award to everybody, so we picked 5. Actually, did not include me. I just read the names of the 5 cities when I walked in here, and I wanted to congratulate them. Each of them is being honored for the work in a specific area, and they were chosen not only for the boldness of their ideas and also the impact that they're having, but also for their potential to spread and be copied by other cities around the world. These actual awards that we're going to give out were designed by a great artist and architect whom our foundation has been lucky enough to work with, Maya Valley, and last year she helped to design a beautiful temporary pavilion at the Serpentine Gallery here in London. And the awards are inspired by the shape of a platter for sharing food, with each of the 5 pieces part of the whole, just like the work that all of your cities are doing to build healthier futures. So now it is my pleasure to introduce the first ever Partnership for Healthy Cities Awards. The first is for a city that's been a road safety champion, making streets safer for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers, and it is Mexico City. Next up, a city that has excelled in tracking public health and making data more inclusive and accessible, Vancouver, Canada. Next, a city that has taken big strides to go smoke-free, leading to cleaner air for everyone, Bengaluru, India. The next award goes to a city that is setting an example for how we can respond to the overdose crisis, and expand access to medications that can save lives. Athens, Greece. Mayor Bukayanis is here. Mayor. And finally, a leader on nutrition, including through its work increasing access to healthy food for public employees, which can create a model for cities everywhere. Montevideo, Uruguay. Mayor Carolina Cose is here. Mayor. Congratulations. Work, and congratulations to all the winners, and one more big round of applause for all of them.
Thank you, Mike. I'll photograph.
Please welcome back to stage Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, joined by Francine Lacroix from Bloomberg Television, and Breathe Life champion Rosamund Adukey-Sedebra.
Thank you, everyone. The energy in the room is very palpable, isn't it? It's very energizing. It's quite incredible. Now, before we start this very important and great conversation, here's a video looking at London's public health efforts.
Thanks, everyone, for joining me today. I'm Professor Kevin Fenton, and I'm here to talk about London's work with the Partnership for Healthy Cities. London, like many urban centres across the world, is grappling with the rising tide of non-communicable diseases. In London, we're really fortunate to have a mayor who sees health as part of his mission and his vision for Londoners. Whether we're promoting healthier foods for residents across the city, whether we're looking at creating physical spaces which create better health, or whether we're working to support the youngest and the most vulnerable within our communities and ensuring that we give them the best start in lives. We must have that comprehensive approach to improving the environment as a key part of improving health. And that's exactly the sort of approach that we're implementing across the city. One of the things you learn in public health is that none of us are an island, and by learning and sharing, we can improve our practice immeasurably, and we can accelerate the adoption of both effective interventions, innovations, and we can help others to grow and develop as well. I'm so proud to say that London is a member of the Partnership for Healthy Cities Network, and I know that with Bloomberg Philanthropy's support, London and cities around the globe will improve our residents' health and save lives.
Mayor Khan, thank you so much for joining us. Rosamund Adukey-Sedebra, thank you as well. Now, you two have quite a special bond, right? As mayor and as advocate, or as I like to call Deborah activist, but she doesn't like it so much. But you've pushed boundaries out of, very sad personal stories. Do you remember the first time you met Mayor, and the first time maybe you decided to work together?
Well, I knew about Rosamond before we met, and so when I first became elected mayor, because of my own experience with asthma, which I was diagnosed with quite late, I was interested to learn more about how I'd got asthma and how I became unwell. And I heard about Ella's case, Rosamond's 9-year-old, and I was very curious. And we were lucky because we had mutual friends. Just by coincidence, Rosamond's lawyer used to work with me. By coincidence, we had people that were dear friends of mine, were dear friends of Rosamond, and they hooked us up. And initially, when you're a politician, the natural instinct is to be nervous about somebody who's used the word activist or somebody who's a campaigner, because you're worried about what they're going to ask for. And then I learned from Rosamond, and the more I learned, the more I thought we're going to do something about it, and so we started to work together. She still challenges me, by the way. She still pushes me to go further. But you need that challenge. But also, you've got there are mayors here today. I think we need to have the humility to realize that we're still learning, right? And so Rosamond is still teaching me, and it's a campaign dear to my heart, not just because of asthma, but for the grace of God, Rosamond could be my mum, and so that empathy is really important, but also finding solutions. It's not just, a hug and a cup of tea and a chat. It's what can we do about it?
Yeah, Rosamond, you've been fighting this fight for over 10 years.
Yeah, very much so. There is actually a misconception, isn't there, I think, about our relationship. I do smile when people seem to think you actually use me, which actually makes me really laugh. I think it's the other way.
If only they knew who uses who.
I think it's the other way. Look, I have to very quickly, before we go into this whole thing, address the elephant in the room. When I got here, luckily enough, I actually didn't see it, but there's a number of people outside. And my thing is to address these things head on. There is a very good reason why ULAYS was, I pushed Sadiq to expand it. And I have said to those outside, come for me. You see, the reason why I say that is there is nothing they can do to really harm me anymore, because I think for me, the actual worst has already happened. This is what people don't really understand. And I have explained to a number of them, and when I do, they actually go quiet. They don't know what to say. So what they're not aware of is the British public actually, my daughter died 10 years ago now, and we had a celebration a few weeks ago. And we had a second inquest. And in that inquest, we actually had independent experts in there. And there were many things they disagreed on, actually, but the one thing they actually agreed on was that the ULAYS needed to be expanded London-wide. So not only does the mayor know this, but the government knows this, and all the councils, especially Lewisham Council. So they actually all know this is what is required. Now, there's a very good reason also why ULAYS needed to be expanded, and those of you who are in medicine here will know why. The rate of asthma has gone up. And since Ella died, the number of children who die from asthma, that hasn't actually gone down. But there is hope, because people sometimes say to me, you continue to campaign and children continue to die. Why do you do it? Well, the actual hope is between March the 20th, 2020 and the 4th of July, 2020 in this country, for the first time ever, no child died from asthma. And if you ask, so what was going on for the first time ever? We had lockdown. There were no cars on the roads. Lo and behold, when our Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Johnson, reopened, within a month, a 14-year-old boy had actually died. So that gives me hope, and that shows me that if things can change, children's lives will be saved. This really is about a matter of life and death. And last week again, I had to sign some papers. And obviously, before you sign it, you actually have to read it. And I think I was a little bit horrified that my daughter was actually a lot iller than I actually thought. because I think part of, I think God is kind. It sort of blocks out certain things you can't remember. But as I was reading every single incident, she was actually far more ill than I actually first realized. Because when you're in it, you don't really think about it. And I think for the first 2 years after she died, I think I was on a completely different planet. But she is not the only one. We now know that 1 in 9 deaths worldwide is due to air pollution. And I repeat my call to the Prime Minister to not avoid this issue. He's going to have to deal with it at some point, no matter who's in charge. And this is for all the mayors in the cities and all the governments. You need to tackle clean air, otherwise people will continue to actually die. And this is what this is about. I just think people outside protesting, they just haven't understood the information. That's okay. We will continue to educate people. And that's what this is really all about. But it is not easy. I make no bones about it. Anything to do with public health has never been easy. If we look at smoking, look how long that took. Hopefully air pollution isn't going to take as long. But the fact that between 7 and 9 million people die every year, and I said this to Dr. Tedros, that we can't keep on saying these figures year in, year out. We actually need to do something. And yes, things are hard, but ultimately, it's just so that children won't continue to die. We can't live in a society that 500,000 children die before the age of 5. This is not acceptable on any scale. And someone once said to me, I can't believe because 12 children die in London, there is all this fuss. And I said, well, you are very lucky. You don't have to experience this. 250,000 children in London have asthma. It's the most common illness in this country, 1.1 million. And as long as there is breath left in my body, I will continue to fight for them against governments, against mayors, against councils. I'm not going to stop anytime soon. I have nothing to lose, you see. Yep. I'm not a politician, so I've got nothing to lose. And they are worth fighting for. Every single child's life is worth it. And if you have witnessed a child fighting to breathe, you know.
Mayor, London 2023, what are the biggest health challenges right now?
Well, look, one of the things that I did when I first became mayor is surround myself with experts. Rosamond is one example. Also, you heard his voice. Professor Kevin Fenton is here in the room as well. Dr. Tom Coffey's in the room as well, who's my health advisor. I can see Dr. Maria from WHO, Elliot Traherne from City Hall. So you surround yourself with the best people. I speak as a former lawyer. What's the evidence? And the evidence is basically we have a number of deaths that occur in our city every year that don't need to occur. They occur prematurely. So the biggest issue we're facing is health inequalities. If you're born in one part of our city, in one postcode, and have a certain socioeconomic background, your life expectancy is much longer than somebody literally 2 miles away, 3 miles away. And unfortunately, Rosamond talked about some of the silver linings from the pandemic. We got to see the consequences of no cars leading to 0 deaths for children. We also, I'm afraid, that the pandemic exposed these structural inequalities in our society. So the biggest issue is addressing those health inequalities. Air quality. By the way, the air quality in the more deprived parts of our city, where people are least likely to own a car, is much worse than the richer parts of our city where people do own cars. The ability to access fresh fruit and produce is much more in the wealthy parts of our city than the poorer parts. The issue of childhood obesity. 4 out of 10 children aged 10 are overweight or obese. They tend to be in the deprived parts of our city more than the wealthier parts. This is an issue of health inequalities, but also something that we're quite passionate about. It's not party politics, but part of our role is educating the public about this and then taking action.
But we have a lot of policymakers, we have a lot of mayors, you have 550 problems a day. How do you prioritize, and how do you prioritize this compared to everything else?
Good question. So the first thing we did, Mike's had to leave to go to another event, but Bloomberg Philanthropies and the foundation helped us from day one, because the first thing we had to do was to let people know how bad the air was. And so we now have across London more air quality monitors than any city in the world. Why was that important? Because I need to share with Londoners what Rosamond was telling me about the quality of air in real time. And the same goes for everything. It goes for air quality, it goes for child obesity, it goes for the importance of walking and cycling. And so data is really important. I think one of the roles of a politician is to be teachers. I think the best politicians are good teachers. And we've got to be teaching the public what's going on in our city, and then get their permission to do bold policies. Yes, there are half a dozen protesters outside. That's a vocal minority. The majority are silent, and we've got to educate them and get them on our side. And the proof will be whether, when it comes to elections, our voters reward us. Again, Mike is a 3-term mayor, right? When Mike first introduced the smoking in public places ban, huge criticism, vested interest opposed it, vocal minority, re-elected 3 times.
Rosamund, how do you engage actually with politicians? So how do you engage with politicians? So what's the right, has it changed the way you engage with politicians in the last 10 years? I know you also said the government, for the moment, doesn't want to engage. Is that because they're distracted? Is that because it's not a priority? Is that just because they have other things to do?
I think it has changed over time. I think when I first started, no one knew me. I am lucky to have Sadiq as mayor of my city. I mean, being a black woman, you end up in spaces that you're not expected to end up in. For instance, going to the Houses of Lords to get the law through there was quite interesting. I think because it is incredibly difficult what you're asking them to do, and politicians want to win elections, and you're asking them to do something that is not popular. That's what the issue is. But I think once I sort of said to you that you need to look at the public's health, and you would actually regret not doing something. I mean, you know, as you can see, I think what the government is trying to do is avoid the actual protest which is going on outside, but that's not a reason not to do something. Ultimately, you have a duty to your citizens to look after them. It is about their health. Children are the future. I think people eventually, as you said, they will come around to it. They will see you are doing a good thing for them. But I appreciate, I don't have that because I'm not a politician. So I get an easier ride. And we all know politics is about votes and winning elections. And you're asking people to do something which is really difficult. And we can't stem away from the fact that we have a cost of living crisis as well going on, which has also impacted it further, energy costs and things like that. But yeah, we can't live in a country that the life expectancy in some places, the gap is up to 10 years. And when you're black and brown like we are, and we say that very proudly, we're very proud of our neighborhoods and where we come from. We make no apologies for that. And when you've reached high office, you can't forget the people that are behind. That's not, I better be careful, it's called up, you know, pull up the ladder. We just don't do that. We just don't do those kind of politics. We have to remember the people we've left behind, and you have to represent them, absolutely.
Mayor, what are some of the schemes that have worked the best? And actually, how do you, I mean, you measure success by data.
Yeah.
What's worked the best?
So let me talk briefly about one of them. So there's a few. So the ultra-low emission zone, within 2 years of implementing the ULEZ, we reduced the toxic air in the centre of our city by almost 50%. There is no other policy in the world that's had that massive reduction just in 2 years. A lot of opposition. We did it. Good results. We then expanded it to a bit further out. We got a further 21% reduction in bad air. I stood for re-election. I received more votes than any sitting mayor in history of elections. So the silent majority are with me in relation to the ULEZ. Another policy that I'm really proud of is around, I mentioned in my speech, you know, it was really controversial when I said, listen, we should ban advertising foods that are high in fat, sugar and salt because they're junk foods, right? Adverts must work. Advertising must work. Otherwise, people wouldn't spend millions of pounds advertising, would they? But what we were seeing was that in poorer parts of our city, on the public transport network, there were adverts which were leading to children putting pressure on their parents to buy bad food. I was told if you ban the adverts, it will lead to losing revenue, London losing money. Our revenue went up, so people just advertised different things. And we've seen the results, 100,000 fewer children who are unwell. And the third thing that I'm really proud of is our policies around schools, around super zones. So we have now, we started the first school street in 2017. This is outside our schools. We don't allow people to drive a car. You've got to walk, cycle, use public transport. We had the first one in Camden in 2017. We have now more than 500, and we now have super zones. So some schools only have water, not fizzy drinks. School streets outside these schools. We've planted greenery, green walls to improve the quality of air. That means the children that Rosamund and I care about, when they're playing in the playground, they're not breathing in poison. When they're walking to school, they're not breathing in poison. But also, they're having good quality, they're having water rather than fizzy drinks. And from the next academic year, every child in London below the age of 11, every child will receive a healthy, nutritious, hot meal free.
How did you deal with the people that pushed back? Because those seem things like everybody would want. So did you ever, I'm sure you never doubted yourself, but did you fight back? Did you just go ahead with the policies?
In all areas, some people have legitimate concerns,
right,
which you've got to address. There's also some people who will never accept what you do. I see in my sightline Professor Fenton, when we were dealing with the pandemic, Kevin and the team, there are many people here as well who helped address the issue of vaccine hesitancy. There were some people who were COVID deniers, vaccine deniers. They even turned up outside some of the clinics we held, right? Some of the, to object. Some of those you've got to write off. You can't win them over. They believe in conspiracies left, right, and centre. But the problem is the middle lot start believing this stuff, and so you need people who are respected opinion formers going out to educate. So the key thing is to have the information, the evidence, and the data, and we've got the evidence and the data, and so the vast majority are reasonable, right? Once you address their concerns, once you give them the data, they're on side. You've got to write off the COVID deniers, the conspiracy theorists, the vaccine hesitancy people who say this is a World Economic Forum conspiracy, that healthy cities is some sort of stooge. What can we do? You can't reason with them. Write them off, work with the vast majority who you can work with.
And you believe, Rosamund, in public engagement, in getting out there and speaking to people, which is time and dedication. You've really pushed some policies. What are you most proud of to date?
Ooh, what am I most proud of? That's really difficult. I think it will be Ella's inquest. And the reason why I'm proud of that is probably nobody apart from our neighbourhood knew who we were, and the fact that to get it quashed, we asked the British public to contribute. And I like the fact that they actually didn't really know us that well then, and yet people, looking at the injustice my daughter felt, people put their hands in their pockets and they contributed to it. And I feel this is my way of thanking the British public for what they did for my family. I think for myself, it sort of gave me a peace of mind. I always have to say to people that Ella had one of the worst cases ever recorded of asthma in this country. Her fight truly was awful and debilitating. I would never quite understand how she managed to keep going. But also, I realized that people trust me. And I think that's something, it is a privilege, it is precious, and not to abuse it. And if I don't know something, I will say to people, I don't know. But I make sure I research, I work with a lot of scientists, I work with WHO, and I try and get, like Sadiq, the best information out there. And that's what people expect from me. Apparently, when people hear me on the television, they actually turn up the volume because they actually believe in what I'm saying. And that's something that I don't take lightly at all. And yeah, it's something I guard very, very, to have a public, these days, people don't trust quite a lot of people. So to actually have that tells me don't take don't take it for granted and be humble about it. I couldn't save my daughter, but there will be many thousands, and Sadiq will say millions of others that can be saved. And I do write to children in India and other places because they always say to me, what about us? Because I talk about London because I'm born and bred here. But I say to them, Ella's law, which we're trying to push through right now, we would like clean air to become a human right. And I spoke to David Boyd from the United Nations, a special rapporteur, because I was having so much pushback, and he kept on saying, keep going, because if it passes, it will be very similar to clean water. 10 years ago, that went through, and countries like Mexico now, they've changed the law. So I'm still hoping the British public will lobby. It's not, I might be the person who fronts it, but I have always needed the support of the public, especially the difficult things I have to do. So again, I've been asking them to support Ella's law, lobby their MPs. Clean air should be a human right in the same way that water is. And let's see, hopefully it will go through and other countries can look at the example.
And Mayor, I mean, London is a complicated big city. I'm sure you have a London utopia in your head. What's next in terms of policy?
Well, first, it's worth just to say, air quality affects every single one of you in your cities. This is not just a London issue. So don't think it's just a London issue. And if you were in London in the middle of last century, you'd be able to smell the sewers, the great stink. You could smell it. And so brave politicians completely changed our city to build sewers. You know, Basilgate and the others did some really brave stuff. Very controversial. They did this. If you were in the 1950s, you'd see the great smog. You couldn't walk more than 5 meters because of the smog from the power stations. Brave politicians passed the Clean Air Act, which meant that the power stations left the center of our cities and improved the visible bad stuff. The problem with air quality is you can't see it. It's an invisible killer. And so every single one of you in your cities has this as an issue. And that's why it's really important when it comes to the issue that I began with about health inequalities. Most of these things actually are also issues of social justice and social injustice, racial justice and racial injustice. So, and all of your cities have this. When Rosamund and I speak to people around the globe, this is a similar issue. And the WHO are now leading on this, trying to educate people across the globe. But it's really important that we have the confidence, and that means getting the evidence, getting the information, so you can explain to your citizens why this is so, so important. And the final thing is, if you address air quality, you also address climate change. Because the causes of climate change are the same as the causes of poor quality air. In cities across the world in the last year, the C40 cities, we've managed to reduce the toxicity in our cities by more than 5% in the last year alone. A 5% reduction in poison in the C40 megacities across the globe. So we've shown we can do it. And so I think in the absence of national governments taking action, we've got to lead the way.
Mayor, we're out of time, but one final question. What do you think is most successful actually in passing on this knowledge or your achievements? Is it town halls? Is it social media? How do you communicate with
I think you've got to use all mediums to get the message across to the citizens. So it could be social. You've got to micro-target. One of the things we learned in the pandemic is don't rely upon one thing. So use different mediums. It could be town halls, it could be TV, it could be radio, it could be social media, it could be different forms of neighborhood social media, but also have the right message carriers. So the right medium, the right message carriers. And here you have some fantastic policymakers, some great clinicians, and great politicians, and we are trusted. And we've got to use that trust we have to get the message across. The first bit is the education. Without the education, the naysayers, the conspiracy theorists will suck all the oxygen out of the room. And so you've got to make sure you've got the information to be confident with these arguments and use the devices we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years to win these debates. And listen, I remember in 2006 as a parliamentarian voting whether to ban smoking in public spaces. And like Mike said, just like he had the same fight in New York, we had pubs, restaurants, live music venues, saying they're going to close down if you ban smoking in public spaces, and now you don't even think about it. The same goes with the great smog, the same goes with the great stink. The problem is you can't smell or see the invisible killer that is in the air. That's why you need to make sure we educate people.
Mayor Khan, thank you so much. Rosamund, Advocacy, Deborah, thank you so much for an inspiring conversation.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage, from Bloomberg Philanthropies, James Anderson.
Good morning, everybody. You've all probably started to have the chance to get to know the Bloomberg Philanthropies public health team led by my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Kelly Henning and Dr. Kelly Larson. I lead another group at the foundation, the Government Innovation Team, and we're focused on helping public sector organizations, especially local governments, develop the ideas, the approaches, the skills, the culture they need to be more creative, ambitious, and effective. Innovation as a practice has really taken off at the local government level over the past decade, far more than at any other level of government. It's not a surprise. Local governments are the front line. You're close to the people you serve. You're constantly getting feedback. And so iteration and adaptation is very much a part of the DNA of city leadership. Over the past 3 years, we can really see the way city halls have reached into the innovation playbook, leveraging investments in innovation, data, collaboration, resident engagement in their life or death battle against COVID and in the fight for recovery. Today, I want to share a couple of lessons that we've observed that cities everywhere can use to their advantage moving forward. So this is Mayor Brandon Scott. When COVID first, the mayor of Baltimore in the United States, when COVID first hit, cities realized they needed to quickly and significantly ramp up contact tracing capacity. And many took the approach of calling large consulting firms and farming out big contracts to them and to their call centers. That didn't sit right with Mayor Scott in Baltimore. He and the Baltimore Health Department wanted to go local, wanted to go hyper-local, and they turned to the city's innovation team to lead the way. The I-Team did what innovation people in city halls do all over the world. They scanned the research. They went to the community to gather insights and find partners. They spent time listening to and learning from residents in order to build a team and a program and approach that community members would talk to and trust. The resulting Baltimore Health Corps was a team of 300 contact tracers, care coordinators, and later vaccine ambassadors. That's 3 of them there on the screen. All were hired from among the 50,000 people in Baltimore who lost their jobs in the first few months of the pandemic. They weren't just people who needed a paycheck. They were people uniquely qualified for the job because they were known in the community. And boy, did they make a difference. In a September 2021 report, the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health compared Baltimore's COVID experience with 325 counties across the United States with similar socio-demographic profiles. The city ranked 81st percentile for the lowest incidence of cases, 73rd percentile for lowest cumulative mortality rate, and 97th percentile for the highest vaccination coverage. The findings were clear. Baltimore fared better than many of its peer cities. Next up is Claudia Sheinbaum, the mayor of Mexico City, whose team just won an award here today. Very exciting. When Mayor Sheinbaum took office in 2018, it was with a promise to make Mexico City a place of rights and innovation. Digital innovation, she said, was how her city would ensure that everyone, particularly the poorest, had access to the health care, the environment, the government services that they were entitled to do, that was their right. Coming out of the pandemic emergency, that promise was especially important in a city where 2/3 of the households saw their incomes plummet during the darkest days of COVID, and infection rates in the poorest communities were five times those of the wealthier ones. That's why Sheinbaum and her team were laser focused on scaling up inclusive digital solutions. It's something I witnessed firsthand when I visited last year. This is the Civil Registry Office. It's the central repository for all vital records, the birth certificates, marriage certificates, divorce decrees for everyone in this 10 million person city. However, for so many of the poorest residents, it was next to impossible to access those records, since doing so meant they'd have to take a day or 2 off from work to stand in long lines or pay a bribe which they couldn't afford. Mayor Sheinbaum saw this as profoundly anti-democratic and a major government failure, and her digital agency responded with great ambition, creating the world's first digital municipal ID, which now has 5.3 million users, consolidating 40 city apps that once had 40 different web pages into a single one, building the world's largest free Wi-Fi network with more than 30,000 hotspots, which effectively makes data free and accessible to every city resident. Now, all you need to do if you're a resident of Mexico City to access your driver's license or your unemployment benefits is push a button on your phone. It's radical, inclusive, ambitious approach for making public services real in the lives of everybody. As the saying goes, you go to the war with the army you have, not the army you want. Mayor Sheinbaum and Mayor Scott were able to achieve what they did because they'd already been investing deeply in their city's capacity to innovate and to be agile. The skills were already there, and they could be deployed when times demanded it. Speaking of rough and going to war, let me introduce you to Oleg Polvenko. the IT director for the city of Kyiv. In 2017, Oleg and his team created a platform called Kyiv Digital, which lets people use their smartphones to pay for things like public transit, parking, and utilities. By 2001, the app was rolling out new services, had helped during COVID, alerting COVID rates and transit closures and everything like that. Flash forward a year to February 2022, when Russian bombs first hit the city, and Oleg and his team were able to turn that nice-to-have service into something people literally couldn't live without, alerting them to air raids, directing them to the closest bomb shelters, helping them find critical supplies like insulin, food, gas. This is what the 1 million users of Kyiv Digital can find on the platform today. On the left, it's a map of Wi-Fi-equipped bomb shelters, and on the right, the incoming air raid alerts. And you know what's most incredible about this story? Oleg and his team were able to transform the platform within 24 hours of the first bombs hitting the city. Kyiv came to the war with the team they have, and that team was ready. Today, they're not only saving lives, I love this, they're also giving people a reason to live. Kyiv Digital has served as a platform for e-democracy, recently helping residents rename 400 streets and parks that previously had Soviet-era names, which is pretty incredible. So this is, without a doubt, a tough time to be in City Hall, to be in city government. The difficulties that started with Trump, with Brexit, were followed by COVID, social unrest, recovery. The challenges keep coming, whether it's migration, inflation, the non-communicable diseases, all of you are fighting so hard to arrest. And that's what makes the lessons, so our status quo today is about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And that's unlikely to change anytime soon. And that's what makes the lessons coming out of Baltimore, Mexico City, and Kyiv, and so many other cities so important. And it's why I share them with every mayor and city leader who will listen. So you're my captive audience today. So here's the first. For more than a decade, Bloomberg Philanthropies has worked to make service design the norm in city halls. Designers and the skill set they bring approaches around qualitative research to understand people's needs, co-creation to inject and incorporate residents' insights into the services and programs you're designing, journey mapping to help policymakers understand the residents' full experience before they get to the service, during the service, once they leave the service and try to get back home. These approaches, which can bring in underheard and disenfranchised voices, were not standard practice in cities when we started our work, but they had become go-to skill sets in Baltimore by the time Mayor Scott needed to ramp up his contact tracing capacity. When the health department wanted to go local but didn't know where to begin, he sent in the designers, and they gathered a trove of qualitative data that became the foundation for the city's contact tracing approach. These resident engagement strategies later played a critical role as the city developed nuanced testing and vaccination strategies, particularly to reach marginalized communities. I understand many of you are focused on resident engagement. That's excellent. We're now seeing departments like health, housing, transportation, and cities around the world hire in designers to support better policymaking. This is a genie we don't ever want to put back in the bottle. The next lesson, there's an amazing man here in London, Charles Leadbeater, who's written that in a crisis, the most effective innovation relies on adaptation. Using existing knowledge to repurpose existing services rather than creating something anew. This makes sense. It's the difference between racing from 0 to 100 and making strategic shifts in what you distribute over existing mechanisms or in the way existing users use an existing system. That's clearly what Oleg and Kyiv Digital team did really well by taking the city's peacetime digital platform and redeploying it for its wartime purpose. Of course, that's just the beginning of good service product fit, not the end. A huge lesson coming out of the pandemic and this period of uncertainty and decreased visibility is the virtue of test, learn, adapt. This iterative approach to policymaking and program design acknowledges that you just can't see everything from your desks and that tapping resident feedback is the best way to get a full picture. Finally, I think we can all agree that the innovation and policy ambition that we've seen from your cities and many others over the past few years is truly unmatched. Cities were agile and ambitious in the face of all the challenges. They partnered in new ways and with dexterity. They even procured quickly, which I think surprised all of us. At the height of these crises, city leaders made change happen at urban scale in ways we've rarely seen our innovation departments do in normal times. So we have to ask ourselves, as we flatten the curve on all of these crises, will we also flatten the curve on our public ambition and our public innovation? Not if we plan to deliver at scale. When I spent time with Mayor Sheinbaum marveling at the digital transformation in Mexico City, I started to really appreciate that they'd achieved innovation scale by design. It all started with a new law, a regulatory framework passed at the beginning of her term that consolidated everything digital into one single agency that reported directly to the mayor. That agency came to life as she recruited world-class talent, especially from Mexico City's youthful tech population, and it gained credibility and momentum as she notched one win after the next in improving services, all in the name of improving rights and innovation. Mayor Sheinbaum and the city shifted the city's innovation approach from pilots and projects to policy and sustainability. And she laid that groundwork before COVID, which I think shows that we can be ambitious even when we're not under the direct threat of a pandemic or war. So these three lessons, can and should serve any city leader well. Design with, not for residents. Test, learn, adapt. Don't hope for scale, design for it. And here at the Foundation, we have a whole team and a crew that are here to support any of your cities that are working to build up your innovation capacity. We'd love to follow up with you. And before I close, I'll just leave you with one final thought. I think if there's anything constant in our world today, it's that nothing stays the same. And many of you, many city leaders today are asking, how do we effectively govern in a state of perpetual change? Part of that answer is building the innovation skills and the tools for agility that I've talked a little bit about today. But another part of it is really the essence of leadership itself and the necessary role leaders like all of you play in envisioning potential futures and asking what if. That is definitely something I learned more than 2 decades ago when I sat in the bullpen with this guy, Mike Bloomberg. That's him in the center there in his one-time office. Mike really was one of those rare city leaders who was always focused on the long term, on potential challenges, on what could happen. That led him to create a pioneering climate plan, prioritize infrastructure investments when no one else was supporting them, and to try to diversify an economy that was way too reliant on Wall Street. It also led Mike to create the government innovation programs at his foundation. Today, we get to work with mayors, a number of you in the room, who increasingly understand that if they're not looking around the corner and planning for the future, no one else will. That responsibility, which is so uniquely yours, presents you with an extraordinary opportunity to create the policies and improve the lives for residents for generations to come. And there's no doubt that the innovation toolkit, and especially a focus on some of the things I've discussed today, can help you make the most of that opportunity in good times and bad. Thank you so much.
Please welcome to the stage, from the University of Bath, Anna Gilmore.
Good afternoon, everybody. It feels like everyone needs to kind of stand up and stretch and wake up. Not that they haven't been absolutely brilliant sessions, they have been, and very hard to follow, but it's a long afternoon, so feel free to stand up and stretch a bit before we kick off. So I'm delighted to be here at this Healthy Cities Summit to talk about the commercial determinants of health. And really because I need to learn from all of you. As we've been hearing, there is so much innovation that can come at city level. And I think the solutions to the commercial determinants of health are really going to come from all of you guys. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit at this session. So I'm going to kick off with a sort of quick introduction, and then we'll really learn from the experts, because I'll have 2 mayors joining me on stage. So what are the commercial determinants of health? The commercial determinants of health really refers to the links between the commercial sector and health. And of course, that's incredibly diverse. As these images show, there are all different sorts of commercial actors, from the local fruit and vegetable seller to the major transnational corporations. And most commercial actors play an incredibly vital role in society. They provide the medicines we need, they give us jobs, they provide the computers we're using, and so on. But over recent decades, there's more and more evidence that some commercial actors and their products and their practices are having an increasingly negative impact on health and indeed on equity. And so key examples of this are the non-communicable disease epidemic, the climate crisis and deaths from air pollution, as we've been hearing, and widening inequalities. There is a whole variety of definitions now around for the commercial determinants of health, but a simple one I've put here, and that is factors that influence health which stem from the profit motive. I think that can be a little bit negative because it implies actually that profit is always going to trump health and that every commercial actor's key purpose is profit. And that might be the case for the biggest commercial actors. But we all know that there are local businesses that have a whole host of purposes, and actually, as well as making a profit and a living, that they're committed to the local community. And so we've got a Lancet series coming out very soon on this topic, which will go into a bit more depth of these complexities around the commercial determinants. But today, what I want to do is think about this at city level. And I'm going to talk about three things. First of all, the products of commercial actors. Secondly, the practices of commercial actors. And thirdly, what can we do at city or local level? So thinking about the products, the simplest way to think about the commercial determinants of health is that increasingly what kills us and makes us sick is the products of major commercial actors, particularly the largest transnational corporations. And I've illustrated 4 products there. We all know those are damaging to health, but I think few of us realize the scale of the damage that just those 4 products cause. So the data vary, but they suggest that these products cause between 19 and 33 million deaths a year. That's at least a third of all global deaths, and up to 2/3, depending on what you include in those figures. So really, just by addressing those, we can really achieve a huge amount. But the complexity comes because of commercial practices, okay? The problems aren't just these products. I'm just going to talk about 2 practices today. So the first is political practices. And the key issue is we know how to tackle NCDs. It's been written in this report, Best Buys, for a number of years. But many countries and cities and local governments are struggling to put these policies in place because they face opposition from incredibly powerful commercial actors. And we've done a lot of work on this, and we've studied the influence of these actors on different policies and at different levels from global to local. And the evidence is really clear that these corporations consistently oppose Best Buy policies, but they do so using the same arguments and strategies each time. And so actually we've developed a taxonomy to help us understand that, in the hope that actually we can then use that taxonomy to predict and prepare and counter those industry efforts to derail policy. But at the end of the day, of course, political will is vital. We've just heard from Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, how there was significant opposition to his policy to ban fast food advertising on London transport. But you can stand up to that with political will and pass policies. So the other commercial practice I thought I'd just highlight quickly is what we group together and call labour and employment practices. And there have been 2 trends over recent years that I think are problematic to health, or particularly problematic to health. So one is the growing pay gap between executive and average worker pay. And the graph here shows that the current pay gaps in a number of countries, so you've got the US, then India, the United Kingdom. So this is the ratio between executive and average worker pay. Those are incredibly large ratios, and in fact, if you were to look at city level, very often that ratio would actually be even larger. But the key issue is that ratio has been getting bigger and bigger. And at the same time, average workers have seen their pay stagnate. But also, they've been increasingly subject to informal work contracts, 0 hours contracts, insecure contracts. And we saw during the COVID pandemic in particular that that has impacts on health. And of course, these practices drive inequalities. And we know that more unequal societies tend to have higher crime and lower social trust. And when you're working at city level, in the ways we've just been hearing, just trying to get your local population on board, those inequalities can therefore present all sorts of problems. So, what can cities do? And here I should say, you know, I'm no expert at city level, but what I've tried to do is think about this and just very simply split this into two buckets, if you like. So on the one hand, what I've called regulating the bad. So, you know, regulating commercial products, NCD best buys, but also carbon advertising bans. We're seeing cities now around the world start to ban what we call carbon marketing, whether it's for holidays or large vehicles or anything that's really going to, you know, increase pollution and so on. But we can also use planning and licensing in all sorts of different ways. We can use it to increase smoke-free, alcohol-free, junk-free public places, to reduce the density of outlets selling unhealthy food products. You know, the evidence is that those outlets tend to cluster in the more deprived areas, so we can use planning rules to try and address that. What about introducing polluter pays type approaches? So we've seen that recently in Spain. Tobacco companies should pay for the litter that they create. Why should we be paying for that litter to be cleared up? And ultimately, underpinning the development of many of these policies, what I think we need is conflict of interest policies. So what I get asked for most often at local level is people saying to me, can you help us develop a conflict of interest policy? Because we need a way forward in figuring out who do we work with and who do we not work with when we're trying to move policies forward. So on the other side, what about enabling the good? So we've heard already from some speakers, we need to get health considered in every single policy, you know, whether it's education or transport, the environment and so on. And there's an opportunity to do that. I also think there's an opportunity to build very different progressive local economies. So even if you're working in an economy that's promoting the transnationals and failing to hold them to account, actually at local level, you can work differently. You know, so you can use your local procurement and contracting policies to contract people who pay a fair wage, who limit their ratio between executive pay and average worker pay. And you can use your contracting not to pay, say, for the big accountancy firms, but the local small accountancy firm or local cooperatives and so on. You can use your food policy in schools to make sure it's using locally sourced food and locally small producers, and in that way you're also helping address inequalities. There's lots of ways in which you can engineer win-wins. And so I think the secret is we're going to rely on all of you to use your innovation and your power to change this and address the commercial determinants of health. So with that in mind, it's no longer moving on. Not working? Oh, there should be. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is just invite our two illustrious speakers, extra speakers, onto the stage. So someone is going to kindly, I think, bring us some chairs and move the stool. But I'd like to welcome Arias Lukwago, Lord Mayor of Kampala in Uganda. Brilliant, here he is. Thank you. How are you doing? Thank you. And then Carolina José, Intendente of Montevideo in Uruguay. So thank you so much for joining us on stage. I thought it would be really good to try and talk about both how we regulate the bad and how we enable the good and the positives. So Carolina, maybe we could start with you, because I know both at national level and at city level in Uruguay and Montevideo, you've made huge progress in addressing NCDs. And in doing that, I think you faced some certain opposition from the major corporations. So I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that and how you overcame it.
Bueno, voy a hablar en español.
I'll give you a little bit of time so you get onto the right channel, which is channel number 1.
Could we have a headset, please? Would you translate? Okay.
So in Montevideo, we had a long trajectory when we fighting in the fight against NCDs. Is something that didn't start from a single point, and from just myself. It started in the 90s, 1990, led by our mayor at the time and then president of our republic, Tabaré y Vázquez, who made a ban against smoking within our buildings, within the town hall. And then other regulations followed and ensued.
It's not working?
You can hear me. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yeah, I can hear now, but it's going in and out a little bit.
Now? ¿Probamos?
1, 2, 1, 2.
Bueno. A eso siguió una serie de medidas.
Then we had other measures, other regulations for Montevideo. We banned smoking in closed environments, closed premises, and then in any workplace as well, as many examples we have seen today. So Montevideo became the first smoke-free city. And then in 2006, the whole of Uruguay was smoke-free in closed premises. After that, we were taken to court by Philip Morris. And I want to say this from a personal viewpoint. I'm not representing anybody. This is my personal point of view. I'm so thankful to Bloomberg because they supported us enormously in this court case. And then another minor detail, but at the time, through the struggle, through the court proceedings, Philip Morris versus Uruguay, Mike Bloomberg took a photo with Tabaré Vázquez, with our president. That was key. That was a great message. We were not alone. And Uruguay won the case, and I think this paved the way, set a precedent, if you will, for what is a great example for the rest of the world, because Philip Morris was given commercial reasons as the fundamentals of their case, of their proceedings. And they were saying benefits are better than public policy. We were saying public policy should be above benefits and above commercial interests. And that has actually set precedents in case law all over the world. So, in Uruguay, we know very, very well that when we talk about multinationals or large corporations, their ambitions is limitless. But before, I was in the Mayoral team. I was a minister for industry and energy in the government, Secretary of State. I was, and I had to work with the Ministry of Health so that we could think about a different food policy. I learned a lot. And as Secretary of State, we worked very closely, and we worked very closely with communities and with large companies. We would predefine our goals. At the beginning, that gave us a few problems, but we said from the beginning we were going to move forward with public policy that will be healthy. We could then maybe negotiate in terms of timings, and so we definitely implemented mandatory labeling for foodstuffs. And, what happened with tobacco, we were able to quantify how much we were progressing concerning the benefits, the health benefits. And over time, these frontal or these top labels that you can have on foodstuffs is something that is going to give us health benefits. We will continue promoting our healthy canteens, as you know, and then we have many more ideas for healthy food in our city, in our country. I hope this was clear.
Thank you very much, Carolina. That was very clear. So let me just tease out a little bit. I think when you were talking about the food policy, you were saying that you set the policy, and you were very clear about the parameters of that policy. But then afterwards, you consulted or met with the food industry to look at implementation. Is that correct?
If we look at the implementation, yes, of course. Por ejemplo,
an example. Currently, we are launching the healthy canteens. This is the example I'm going to use. A healthy canteen is healthy when they can sell soft drinks, but they cannot show them, they cannot publicize them. They're obligated to have a healthy menu and also vegetables and fruit and clean water, easily accessible, easily bought. They need to fulfill a series of conditions. But the advantage is that to get the healthy canteen certificate, then they have a few freebies. All the audits that we may conduct are free for them. We won't charge them for audits and analysis and reviews. There is surveillance, there is control, but we don't charge them for it. So Montevideo, the city of Montevideo, is always overseen.
Okay, great. So there's a win-win for health and for business in that model.
Sí, yo creo que sí. En este caso de cantinas saludables,
I think so, because are allowing us to open the doors to other healthy canteens, or canteens that want to change into healthy canteens will not have to invest a lot of money. We have $3,000 a year that will be deducted of their bills because when they become healthy. And I think that's an incentive, and if we also make that go hand in hand with a positive communication campaign, it will be really good. And I think the younger population, they know more, they're better informed, they demand healthier food. And for us politicians, this is really good. And for the people who are not eating as well, because they don't have such awareness, we have to make it.
We are in the space.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really exciting innovation that everyone can learn from. So thank you for sharing that with us. Arias, let's turn to Uganda next, because I know Uganda also has actually one of the most progressive tobacco control legislation in Africa, and there were some big fights there from British American Tobacco in particular. But one of your key roles now is to implement that and enforce that policy. So have you got some experiences you can share with us about how it was maybe getting the policy in and implementing it now at local level, and some of the opposition you might have faced?
Well, I must say our experience is not so much different from the Uruguay situation. We have made big strides in the fight against public smoking. We have also made some interventions in the area of road safety, as well as pollution. There are big strides we have made with the support from Bloomberg Philanthropies, Vital Strategies, and a couple of other development partners. But specifically with the smoking, tobacco control, we as a nation ratified the World Health Organization Convention way back in 2007. And we embarked on a journey of enacting our own domestic legislation. We created that legal framework that would help us to engender that environment which is smoke-free. And in 2016, we had that Act of Parliament enacted. But again, battles started. Actually, even in the process of having that legislation, We had battles spearheaded by BAT, British American Tobacco. They fought our efforts, left, right, center. We were mobilizing even local farmers there because we have over 20,000 local farmers. And hitherto, tobacco growing was considered as one of the major economic activities. Actually, it was on the list, tobacco was on the list of our cash crops. And to strike it off the list, it has been a nightmare. It's been a fight. So fast forward, when the law was enacted in 2016, just like what happened in her city, BAT dragged us to the Constitutional Court. We got embroiled in protracted litigation until 2019 when we won the case. But even after winning the case, now they started indulging in some other shenanigans. Eventually, they worked on covert and overt machinations of undermining our efforts, including bringing farmers to demonstrate, mobilizing them to do this, and so on and so forth, and also undermining the good aspects of the legislation, because I must proudly say, I think on the African continent, we have the best legislation as far as tobacco control is concerned. But now implementation is a challenge, courtesy of, thanks to the involvement of BAT in all those struggles they have engineered. So right now, what we are experiencing is that fight against BAT and the people they are instigating. Again, as a nation, we banned single cigarette sale. We banned it. Apart from banning open adverts, banning smoking in public places, and so on and so forth. But even single cigarette selling, it was banned. But what BAT does is to covertly instigate those small traders to violate the law. And enforcement on our side, because we are very thin on the ground, I must confess, it becomes a little difficult. So that's where we have some very big challenge. But as far as other interventions are concerned, we have done our best in the area of road safety. Quite big strides have been made. We prepared our strategic plan, which we are following to the letter, and also regularly we release reports because we concentrate so much on data collection. We are collecting data which helps us chart out a policy direction. Of course, again, with the support of the Bloomberg philanthropies initiatives. You realize we have a unique problem as a city. I think this we share with Lagos, Abuja, and the Far East, I think, in India, where they have tuk-tuk, that motorcycle transport, public transport. Okay. Tuk-tuk, in our case, we have what we call boda. It's public transport offered by motorcycles. And I think in Lagos, they call it Okada. It's a very, very big challenge in terms of addressing issues of road safety. We wanted to adopt the safe systems approach, but it's not that easy because that's our target. In the policy we have adopted safe systems approach so that we create systems on our roads and in the city that would ensure that we have road safety, that our roads are safe. Unfortunately, implementation of the same is still a big challenge. And right now, from our latest statistics, 48% of the road crashes we have registered are in that area of borders. Wow. 48%, which is still a very, very big challenge. And in terms of fatalities on the road, it's 7 people per 100,000. And how? That's where we stand right now.
How are you addressing that? So you told me earlier there's this, the motorcycle public transport used as taxis, but then as soon as you try and control that they're opposing you. So how have you addressed that? Is it through a communication policy or? What's the way forward in kind of trying to get them on board to
We are trying to navigate around using a multifaceted approach and focusing so much on buy-ins. Because yes, we are enforcing public health policies. We try our best. But you know, they are draconian in nature. They are oppressive. And then you wouldn't want to have that upsurge. You will be quick to accuse me of being a politician. That is typical of politicians. But we want to have a win-win situation. So we emphasize buy-ins. That's why we have decided now to go in with associations of these border cyclists. We sit down with all these sector players and see how we can change the value systems so that they appreciate that saving lives is vital, is important. Actually, it starts with their lives. And we are trying that as much as possible as leaders.
Great. So there are some similarities there in moving these forwards as win-wins for
as win-win. Even in the area of pollution, by the way, we have created a task force in that area of pollution, which brings on board the different regulatory agencies, manufacturers who are the major pollutants. We have the Uganda Manufacturers Association, we have bankers, we have telecommunication companies. We have involved all of them in these activities, and we regularly interface and organize activities with them. We want to walk the journey together so that they appreciate the value of protecting the air quality in our country. That's as far as pollution is concerned, and even other related matters like NCDs. NCDs, we have also partnered with a number of corporate agencies, including traditional leaders. We organize marathon. If you were to come to Kampala around December there, November, December, sometimes we close the whole of the city and everybody is on the road running. We organize those mass marathon with the corporate agencies in areas of telecommunication, with the Kabaka of Uganda. Is a very, very powerful traditional leader there. If you move to, I have seen people from, is equivalent to the Asante Hen of Ghana. And so we organize these mass activities so that we involve people in these activities of running so that we mitigate the issues related to NCDs.
Right.
Yeah.
We can go, but not for running.
So it's something which is really very, very exciting. If you come to Kampala on a particular Sunday in November, December there, it can be Kabaka's birthday and the traditional leader there. We said this is his birthday now.
So you're creating some real positivity and getting the whole community
getting the communities on board so that people appreciate this. Yeah. So one, we use it for sensitization, but two, for people to practically get active to handle issues of NCDs.
So brilliant. Some more brilliant ideas. Thank you so much. Karina, I just wondered really quickly if you could say a little bit more about your food policy and how, because I think a real challenge is to create food policy where it's good for the environment, it's good for local farmers, for local businesses, as well as good for health, so that everything comes together. Can you say a little bit about if you've managed to achieve that locally?
Bueno, voy a tratar. Muchas gracias.
I will try. Thank you very much. We cannot think of health policies isolated from the environmental policies. We think that they're pretty much the same thing. We are certain that that's the way, and we cannot think of environmental policies without social justice. So everything is interconnected. So we try to develop transitory work for those individuals who are unemployed. And just to give you an example of this type of transitory work, it's a program carried out involving 100 women who are now being trained on everything related to cultivating the soil. And towards the end of the year, they'll be able to turn non-fertile soils, lands that were taken over by the government, that will turn into gardens or farms for public use. So we are trying to create a circle thanks to which those women who do not have work, they will have their own skills, and this will go on for about a year, and then we will increase it. So with this project of the healthy canteens, not only we are helping to bring in small business people, women that work with us in the government, in the local government. We've organized local events in the city, and we try to ensure that those that provide catering are these women that we are training. And we now have also a mobile kitchen to teach people how to cook healthily in the poor, deprived areas. In my country, there is still poor eating areas, and we go to these eating areas, helping them, bringing them fruits and vegetables, because we have a big logistical center where these fruits and vegetables are traded. And we work there with voluntary people or temporary work, so that those things that are not sold in the market but can still be consumed is donated to these public eating areas. So over and over again, we try to connect health with sustainability, and we try to tackle social injustice, and we also try to give better opportunities to people thanks to our healthy program to business women, women that are willing to enter into the entrepreneurial world. And today we've talked about the NCDs and the silent pandemic, but there's another silent pandemic, which is the gender violence one, and it doesn't respect borders. So gender-based violence must be tackled. We are serious about it, and we try to open as many doors as possible to better health and better opportunities for women.
Thank you so much to both of you. We've run out of time, really, but that was really fascinating, I think, to hear both how you've managed to oppose the big commercial actors, but also the amazing innovation that's going on, where you're creating, real win-win-win-wins, bringing, the economy and health and local business together. So thank you both so much. I hope there were lots of lessons there that we can all take home and use. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now welcome to the stage, Becky Adoy, representing Bite Back 2030.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mr. Mayor, Bloomberg, and the World Health Organization for inviting me to speak today. My name is Becky, I'm 19, and I'm a campaigner with Bite Back 2030. We're a movement of British teenagers campaigning for a fairer food system, one that is designed for child health and not against it. We come from all over the UK, from completely different backgrounds and with loads of different interests, but we're united by one stark and damning fact, that by the age of just 11, the health of 1 in 3 children is at risk from the food that they eat. 1 in 3 by the time that they leave primary school. And on top of that, children living in disadvantaged areas are twice as likely to be affected by diet-related ill health than their peers. The more the cost of living bites, the greater this health disparity will grow. This is why I was so keen to take action. I joined Bite Back in 2021, and I was proud to be the chair of our London Youth Board, representing young people from boroughs right across the city. London is a fantastic place, but if we're being honest, it's still far too difficult to eat healthily when realistically it should be easy. I live in a world flooded with unhealthy food, pouring out of our high streets, our school canteens, and our supermarket shelves. I live under constant bombardment from junk food advertising. I'm encouraged to eat way too much of what isn't good for us, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep. The ads are there when I'm on social media, when I'm walking down the street on my way to uni, and listening to music. Is it any surprise that junk food is playing a starring role in young people's minds? But together, we can fix this. Thank you to Mayor Khan and Bloomberg for all their supportive efforts in London and across the globe, and for taking the health of young people so seriously. We've seen the difference that these measures have made in tackling junk food marketing across TfL public transport, and we are pleased that free school meals have now been extended to all primary school children in London, recognising that schools are the single biggest opportunity that we have to make sure children have access to healthy, nutritious food. To others in the room today, please remember you are part of the solution. In your own cities, you can protect child health and the futures of millions of children. I know that your presence here today indicates you take this responsibility seriously, and we're relying on you, our partners, in this call to action. Take a look at your streets, your public transport systems, and the spaces where young people socialise. Are they positive places which support their health? Or are they places where junk food is put in the spotlight? We're not going away anytime soon, and we're building a growing movement of young people demanding better from political leaders and the food industry. It won't be long before young people across the world are demanding that more is done to protect their health, just as they demand that more is done to protect the health of our planet. We're relying on all of you for your leadership. When you're being asked to consider these structural, systemic issues, we're asking you to keep open minds and open dialogues so that by 2030, we have created a world where no child goes on to suffer ill health. We're relying on you to be ambitious and brave and to keep up the good work, to perpetuate change and ensure that everyone in your cities can grow up healthily. Thank you for listening to me today.
And now a message from Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, Director General, the World Health Organization.
Mayor Sadiq Khan, WHO Global Ambassador Mike Bloomberg, and Jose Castro, President and CEO of Vital Strategies, honorable mayors, dear colleagues and friends. WHO is honored to co-host the Partnership for Healthy Cities Summit, especially in London, which has been a member of the network since it was launched in 2017. Together, the city leaders in this network protect millions of people from injuries and non-communicable diseases, which are responsible for more than 80% of all diseases globally. Many of these diseases are preventable. Mayors have a vital role to play in the fight against preventable diseases and injuries through policies that give people more access to healthy food, smoke-free spaces, safe roads, and healthy conditions in which to live and work. I commend the Partnership for Healthy Cities, and especially the mayors and cities who are being recognized today. Athens, Greece, for its work on overdose prevention. Bangalore, India, for action on tobacco control. Mexico City, Mexico, for promoting physical activity and road safety. Montevideo, Uruguay, for establishing nutritional standards and healthy canteens. And Vancouver, Canada, for making public health data more accessible. Congratulations to you all. WHO remains committed to working with Bloomberg Philanthropies, Vital Strategies, and all of you here today to build cities all over the world that nurture health. I thank you.
Thank you for joining us. The Spotlight sessions will begin at 3:30 p.m. Overdose prevention will take place in the Gilbert Scott Suite, located on the first floor. Road safety and mobility will take place in the Handsome Hall on the ground floor. Food policy will take place in the quarters located on the first floor. Data and surveillance will take place in the Exchange, located on the first floor. Tobacco control will take place in the gallery, located on the first floor. Food Policy B will take place in the briefing room, located on the first floor. Thank you for joining us. The Spotlight sessions will begin at 3:30 p.m. Overdose prevention will take place in the Gilbert Scott Suite, located on the first floor. Road safety and mobility will take place in the Handsome Hall on the ground floor. Food policy will take place in the quarters located on the first floor. Data and surveillance will take place in the exchange located on the first floor. Tobacco control will take place in the gallery located on the first floor. Food Policy B will take place in the briefing room located on the first floor. Thank you for joining us. The spotlight sessions will begin at 3:30 p.m. Overdose prevention will take place in the Gilbert Scott Suite located on the first floor. Road safety and mobility will take place in the Handsome Hall on the ground floor. Food policy will take place in the quarters located on the first floor. Data and surveillance will take place in the exchange located on the first floor. Tobacco control will take place in the gallery located on the first floor. Food Policy B will take place in the briefing room located on the first floor.